Hey, Matt, we got big performances by the New York Breds and the Whitney. Diversify did his thing. The West Virginia Derby was a bomb. Mr. Freeze threw in the lightly raced Mr. Freeze. We had a humdinger in the test. What else are we going to talk about this week on HorseCenter?
And we got great turf racing to preview at Arlington Park. It's the Million and the Beverly D, and at Saratoga, the 4-Star Dave.
Yeah, we got some long shot picks. We're not all on the favorites this week. Watch our picks for the Million, the Beverly D. We'll talk Secretariat, 4-Star Dave. Watch it now. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host on the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. It's good to see you today, Matt.
It's great to see you too, my friend. And we got a lot of great horse racing from last weekend and this weekend. So let's do a show.
Let's do it. And I want to apologize. We're coming out late this week. This is Friday already. We've had some production difficulties here. We tried to get the show out earlier, but again, our apologies on a late HorseCenter this week. Matt, let's talk about what happened last week. There were some big races, none bigger than the 1.25, the prestigious Whitney from Saratoga. This is the race where Onion once defeated the great Secretariat. We had no Secretariats this year, but we did have some top New York breds highlighting the field for the Whitney.
We sure did, Brian. It was billed as a matchup between Diversify and Mind Your Biscuits, two of the top-ranking New York breds of all time, and that's the way it played out. Of course, there was a little drama beforehand because, as is the way in Saratoga, the weather is volatile up there, and a big storm rolled in. The horses were already saddled, and they had to stay in the paddock for a good 20, 30 minutes waiting for the storm to pass. The skies opened. The track got sealed. The track was sloppy, and everything was going in the favor of Diversify. And on that day, he was pretty close to unbeatable, Brian.
Yeah, agreed, Matt. Yeah, I think it was well over half an hour that the post time for the Whitney had to be delayed on Saturday because of the storms in the area. Certainly the track didn't hurt Diversify, but Diversify was powerful. He used his speed right out of the gate, took command early, and the race was all but over as they passed the stands for the first time there at Saratoga. Diversify wire to wire. Yeah, Matt, I don't know if any horse in America would have beat him in this particular race on Saturday. People talk about his prowess at Belmont. Big wins in the Jockey Club and the Suburban, to name a few, but looks awfully good at Saratoga too. So Diversify thrust his name as to one of the top older males in the country. Third straight win, Matt. He's won 10 of 15 lifetime. Of course, outside of the state of New York, he's 0 for 2. So there will be questions as we get a little closer to the Mile and a Quarter Breeders' Cup Classic this year at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, there certainly will. And Mind Your Biscuits ran an admirable race. My friend Chad Summers, his trainer, decided to take a shot in the Whitney, expecting the kind of field where it made sense, and take Mind Your Biscuits around 2 turns for the first time in his career. As a 5-year-old, he's easier horse to work with, has had such success sprinting all over the world, and Mind Your Biscuits ran an admirable race, finishing second. He was getting challenged down the lane by Discreet Lover, who has a way of getting in the money on big race days. And when Discreet Lover came, Mind Your Biscuits dug in, had a little bit more after the 9 furlongs, and held that horse off. And Chad Summers is pondering what to do next. Dirt mile, back to sprinting. We'll see. But in the end, the Whitney was a New York bred exacta.
Yeah, big day for New York breds for sure. Diversify moves on. He'll probably try for a repeat in the Jockey Club Gold Cup as a prep for the Breeders' Cup. Mind Your Biscuits, yeah, it was a good performance. What a nice horse. He's, as you said, he's run great in Dubai. He's run well in California. He's done well everywhere he's gone, and I'm not sure what they do with him now as far as 10 furlongs a mile or 6 furlongs. It seems like 10 furlongs might be asking a little bit. But considering the sloppy track and Diversify controlling speed, you'd have to say Mind Your Biscuits. It was a nice performance going 2 turns for the former sprinter. Maybe the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile is his path this year, but no matter where he goes, Mind Your Biscuits is a nice horse. Speaking of nice horses, Matt, let's shift gears, head a little bit west, out to Mountaineer Park, West Virginia. It was their big race of the year. Of course, the $500,000 West Virginia Derby was on Saturday. Going in, it looked like there was a nice field of kind of Group 2, Group 3 type of horses. Several horses that on paper looked like they could win. But as they started running the race, Mr. Freeze dominated. Mr. Freeze, a lightly raced son of 2 Honor and Serve from the Dale Romans barn, making only his 4th lifetime start, Matt. This West Virginia Derby was impressive.
It sure was, and looked a little bit like the Whitney in that Mr. Freeze broke out of the gate, got the lead, and he was on his way. Got comfortable out front there, got brave out front there, set the fractions, and to his credit, when High North, who is a decent horse amongst the 3-year-olds, rolled up to his outside, got basically head-to-head with him, heading around the turn into the stretch. Mr. Freeze kicked it into another gear and put High North away very, very easily, drew off to a big win of 8 lengths, impressive time below the 148 benchmark, and picked up one of the best buyer speed figures of 102 for a 3-year-old this year.
Yeah, speed ratings wise, it's one of the best 3-year-old performances of the year. 147 and change is one of the fastest times we've seen from a 3-year-old, and actually is the fastest West Virginia Derby in about 15 years. By all accounts, this was a big performance. High North, a 2-time stakes winner, the Iowa Derby winner, came right up to him on the turn. Yeah, and that was it. Mr. Freeze said, no, not today. Took off, looked like a really good horse, Matt. This is the time of year when, of course, the last few years, Arrogate and last year West Coast kind of took over the division, went on to win Eclipse Awards with their really strong second halves. That won't be an option for Mr. Freeze, of course, with what Justify did the first half of the year. But Mr. Freeze is certainly eligible to prove himself as a cream of the crop kind of second half 3-year-old. It'll be interesting to see. They're talking Travers already. Travers will still be within his first 4 months of racing. Sounds a little bit like Justify, what he did the first half of the year. Maybe they do that mile and a quarter at Saratoga against a tough field. Maybe they wait for the Penn Derby. But either way, I think we have a new star on the horizon, Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, and trainer Dale Romans is one who's never shy about taking a shot in the big races, whether it's going to be in the Travers or for the $1 million in the Pennsylvania Derby. But we've got a nice mix of newish horses like Mr. Freeze, and we've got some good ones left from the Triple Crown, like Good Magic, Gronkowski, and Hofberg. So the 3-year-old picture is still interesting.
Yeah, we're going to talk a whole lot more about the Travers the next couple weeks. Of course, Romans has said that his other horse in the barn, or one of his other horses in the barn, King Zachary, is pointing for the Travers. So that might be a reason why he waits just a little bit longer with the very lightly raced Mr. Freeze, now 3 for 4 lifetime. Matt, I think while those performances were big, Diversify and the Whitney, Mr. Freeze in the West Virginia Derby, we got to talk a little bit about the test. Always an excellent race. We've seen some marvelous horses and some marvelous races in the test over the years. 7 furlongs for the 3-year-old fillies. And this was one of the best tests ever, Matt. Separation of powers. Mia Mischief put a good field away at the top of the stretch, and the 2 of them ding-dong down the lane. It was fun to watch.
It sure was, Brian. It was a slugfest down the stretch for sure. It was a battle that was initiated by Mia Mischief, who is trained by Steve Asmussen, who is having one of the best Saratoga meetings that he has ever had. Took off out of the gate, took the lead, opened up to a nice margin. Seemed to have things going her way very well. On the other hand, Separation of Powers broke and was at the back of the pack, but coming around the turn in this 7-furlong race, Separation of Powers started to move and made up ground in a flash. Brian, it seemed like in 100 yards she had gone from almost last place to passing the rest of the field and coming after Mia Mischief. They hooked up. Separation of Powers to the outside, and they just battled it all the way down to the wire, with Separation of Powers just getting by at the end. A terrific stretch battle.
Terrific stretch battle for two horses coming out of the victory ride at Belmont, where they were 4th and 5th respectively. I think that's a draw line through a race for both of them. Separation of Powers was making her first start back and broke horribly that day. Mia Mischief went head and head on the lead and faded just a little bit, although neither were beaten much in the victory ride. But I think the test is the real race. We saw how good these two really are. Separation of Powers might have been the forgotten filly after not racing for so long, but she's come back in sharp form. 6 lifetime races for the classy daughter of Candy Ride, and the Chad Brown trained filly has now already won 2 Grade 1s. This was a big performance, but Mia Mischief, what can you say about her? Because she had a lot of pace pressure in this 7-furlong test, and she just hung around tooth and nail. She would not let Separation of Powers go by her, very easily at least. And Steve Asmussen, and another good Into Mischief filly. These two, Matt, I think there are good older fillies out there, sprinting fillies or sprinting mares, but I think these two are certainly major contenders for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint the first weekend at Churchill Downs in November. All right, that was last week, Matt, but this week, actually now tomorrow, because of our late show this week, we have some big turf races to talk about. First off, I want to go to my old haunting ground up in suburban Chicago. Beautiful Arlington International Race Course. They have Million Day again on Saturday. The Million has been a race that's traversed some rough waters over the years, a little less than 4 decades now. How can we ever forget how it started back in 1981 with that unbelievable finish between John Henry and the Bart? I still can't believe John Henry got up in that one, Matt. But this year we got a nice field, a full field of 11, going the 1.25 miles on the Arlington Park Turf Course. And to tell you the truth, Matt, my favorite turf horse in America, Oscar Performance, is the horse I have to look at first.
Yeah, for sure, Brian. Oscar Performance is a very worthy top choice in there. Has done really well this year with his win in the poker. And as we know, Oscar Performance likes the going at Arlington Park. He went out there last year and won the Secretariat, which is for 3-year-olds, trained by Brian Lynch. This is a very, very talented horse and has been throughout his career. But anytime you're talking about a big turf race in this country with a big purse, you gotta talk about Chad Brown, the 2-time Eclipse Award winner, Mr. Turf. He's got 3 horses in this field, just like he seems to have 3 or 4 in every big race. He's got Robert Bruce, big closer. He's got Money Multiplier, who likes really firm going, and he's got Almanar, a little bit more lightly raced horse that appears to be getting better. And there's some pretty nice Europeans too, Bri.
Absolutely. Getting back to Oscar Performance, let's take a look at that poker that he ran. This was his first race since the Breeders' Cup Turf, and really a sharp performance. He in front of him were very fast fractions. So this is a horse that could lead early and very well may do that on Saturday, but he stalked the pace. And Matt, it was a course, easily broke the course record. Belmont was extra fast, of course, the turf course there this spring, but he broke the course record easily. He tied a world record in that race. This is a different kind of race, 10 furlongs. Often the Arlington Million, they don't run fast early, and I think that only helps Oscar Performance to control the race. There is some other potential horses who could be close early, but Oscar Performance should look to go to the lead unless somebody does something crazy. He is coming out of the 11 hole, which could make it a little harder for him to get the perfect position heading into the first turn there in Arlington. But for me, he's the horse to beat. Now you brought up the Chad Brown horse. It's interesting. Robert Bruce only has lost one race. We saw him get beaten in Manhattan, but only beaten a couple lengths there. He's from Chile. Money Multiplier, son of Looking at Lucky, the Kentucky bred, has been a serious stakes horse now for a few years for Chad Brown. And then Almanar might be the most interesting one of the three. He had a long layup and came back recently. We saw him win a very nice allowance race at Belmont Park, Belmont Stakes weekend. So, yeah, Chad Brown has no surprises in it with a shot there. I tell you what, Matt, can't forget about the Euros in this race as well. Europeans have done well, of course, at Arlington and the Arlington Million. Deauville returns. He's been in the Arlington Million now. This will be his third run, and he was a good third each of the last 2 years. So Deauville is a threat again, off decent form in Europe. But I tell you what, the horse with slightly longer odds from Europe, Century Dream, is a horse that I'm looking at a lot. I think he'll be double digits in here. He's coming off two pretty nice performances, albeit losing performances, but pretty nice performances at Ascot. I think he fits with this group a lot, and Century Dream will be a horse that I play at the odds in the million.
Yes, and of course, over at Royal Ascot this year, Century Dream did finish ahead of Deauville, and just for the record, Deauville only has one win in the last 2 years. But for me, I'm going to be going for what I think is a little bit of a bigger price. You talked about Robert Bruce just losing narrowly in the Manhattan. In that race, it was Spring Quality for Graham Motion that made a big closing move to win that race. And I'm going to go with Spring Quality in there. You can't go wrong getting some nice odds on a Graham Motion horse.
Absolutely. And Spring Quality is a nice horse. I think he's kind of flown under the radar. The Manhattan changed that a little bit. That was an exciting win where he actually ran down Sadler's Joy, who looked like he had rallied to win the Manhattan. We were there. Matt Spring Quality ran a big race. And I tell you what, he was a nice dirt horse, but since switching to turf, he's had 4 races now in the grass. Definitely looks like an up-and-comer in this turf division. Spring Quality, a mile and a quarter should fit him well. Certainly another horse to consider strongly in the million and to add into your exotics. And yeah, Graham Motion knows how to get it done on the turf for sure. Interesting race for the big one at Arlington, the Arlington a million, 11 going. Matt and I are going to be enjoying this one Saturday from Arlington Park. The million is the big one, of course, Matt, but we can't forget about the other big turf races at Arlington Park. It's a great card there on Saturday, several stakes, but the 2 other big ones, the Secretary, we mentioned Oscar Performance won it last year, and the Beverly D. Real quick, the Secretariat, Matt, to me, I hate to be a chalk-eating weasel here, but to me, this is Analyze It's race to win. Analyze It, of course, has not lost on turf other than 2 really interesting, tough battles with Catholic Boy, another top American turf horse. So Analyze It gets no Catholic Boy this time, mile and a quarter at Arlington Park. I kind of want to see Analyze It strut his stuff a little bit after those 2 tough losses.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Brian. Catholic Boy's getting ready for the Travers.
That's right. Catholic Boy's going to make another attempt on dirt, so that'll be interesting too for those 2 old rivals. Hopefully they hook up again with Analyze It getting a Secretariat win, and Catholic Boy maybe putting in a nice showing against the dirt horses in the Travers. Enough about the boys, Matt. It's all about the boys here. Let's talk about some ladies. Let's talk about some turf fillies and mares. Of course, I speak of the Beverly D, just another wonderful turf race at Arlington. And this is going to sound old. Analyze It, by the way, is trained by Chad Brown. We talked about his million horses. Now the Beverly D, we get into even deeper Chad Brown waters, Matt. How many does he have in this year's Beverly D?
I think it's Chad. I think it's 4. in this race. And Brian, he's entered that many in other races before, but this is some foursome that he's got in here. It's Sister Charlie, who this filly may be at the top of the whole group. There's 4-Star Crook, who was able to beat Sister Charlie in a recent race, and then he's got a couple that are not quite as big names, but are good horses for themselves. He's got Inflexibility in there, and he's got Theus in there also. So I don't know. It's going to be some tough task for any horse to beat Chad Brown in the Beverly D with that kind of quality group.
Yeah, tough to beat Brown in the Beverly D. Theus may be the hanging Chad for me there, Matt, if you will. Inflexibility is a really nice filly who's run up in Canada. We remember her, but she's proven to be a very good turf horse. But the top two, Sister Charlie and 4-Star Crook, that was a really fun New York handicap, a visually interesting race. Those two long shots just opened up gobs of ground on the backstretch and even into the far turn. And then all these good turf mares were coming at them. 4-Star Crook, the New York bred, another New York bred. We've been talking about New York breds. We didn't mention Audible. What a year for New York breds. But anyway, 4-Star Crook got first jump in the New York handicap. It was a late first jump as far as the others were ahead, but it was a winning first jump. And she upset her stablemate, Sister Charlie. Sister Charlie is a really, really good turf mare, deserves to be the favorite in here. But I was interested by the morning line. Sister Charlie 9-5. She came back and won the Diana, which was another tough race. 4-Star Crook hasn't run since that New York handicap. She's at 9-2. I think she struggles for respect a little bit. I think both of them, and if the odds are that different on the tote board, getting close to post, you might want to think about 4-Star Crook again, because a repeat of her New York handicap performance puts her right in there. But certainly we need to talk about other horses besides Chad Brown in here, Matt.
Yeah, we sure do. I picked 4-Star Crook back in the New York handicap. So, instead of going to the well again on 4-Star Crook, I'm going to look to Athena, the Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore combo, who ran a big race in the Belmont Oaks. Instead of, I know I'm probably battling against a pretty strong tide here, a Chad Brown tide, but I liked what I saw from Athena in there, so I'm going to take a shot with that filly in the Beverly D.
Yeah, we're actually switching here a little bit, Matt. I liked her in the Belmont Oaks. I don't think we'll see the odds. She was 10-1 that day. She ran a big race. Now she has to go against tough older mares in her second start at American. Sometimes those Euros pop the first time and don't quite do it quite as big the second time. So I'm actually against Athena a little bit. She's second choice on the morning line, but certainly a threat in here. We didn't even mention Daddy's Little Darling, who was rallying fast in that New York handicap as well. She was third. And nothing to take away from Athena from that big Belmont Oaks performance, because it was awfully good. And she's got a shot against the older ones here. Donna Bruja, Matt, she's become a real speed filly a little bit, but the import has a lot of good races. You don't hear her name a lot, but she's a tough turf mare, and she was second in this race last year. Tell you what I'm looking at, though, for longer odds. A filly named Nialetti. She's a 3-year-old, and she's been running shorter over there, but I kind of like her for the stretch out. She's a daughter of Arch. She's been running against very good horses in Europe. Her form is good. Last time she was beaten pretty good in fourth, but that was to Alpha Centauri, who is an absolute superstar over in Europe. So watch out for Nialetti to pull a little bit of a surprise in here. I don't know if she beats all the Chad Brown mares and some of the other ones we mentioned, but I think Nialetti's going to run a big race at some good odds in here, Matt.
Yeah, that's, I never frown upon horses that are stretching out on the turf. I always feel that that's a good angle. I prefer that over turf horses that are cutting back in distance.
Yeah, and with that pedigree, Arch, I'm never afraid to bet an Arch stepping up in distance. Sister Charlie's the favorite. 4-Star Crook is just part of her Chad Brown experience in the Beverly D, the four-pronged team from Chad Brown. Athena, we mentioned Donna Bruja, we mentioned Daddy's Little Darling, some other good mares in there. Nialetti's my long shot. Matt's on Athena, the 3-year-old from Aidan O'Brien. Should be a fun Beverly D. Hey, Matt, we talked about the big turf races in suburban Chicago, but we cannot forget what Saratoga has this weekend, because the 4-Star Dave. Now, I was there for the 4-Star Dave last year. We had a storm right before the race. I think that one was delayed a little bit, too. The winner, World Approval, just ate up the wet turf, and he went on to become our turf champion. That was the beginning of his big winning streak, big Grade 1 winning streak last fall. So, they have a lot to live up to, but I tell you what, looks like we're going to get 6 horses on the Saratoga turf. All 6 of them are graded stakes type performers.
Yeah, Brian, and all you people out there that automatically say, "Oh, small field, that's horrible." It is always nice to have a bigger field, but this is one really interesting field of 6 turf runners in here. Quality horses. We've got a great combination, a couple of horses that like to run on the front end, and then a bunch of really quality closers. So it's a nice field. And we may as well start by talking about Heart to Heart, who loves to run on the front end all over the country. It doesn't matter what racetrack this Brian Lynch trainee shows up on. He runs big everywhere. Just a neck short of coming into this 4-Star Dave with 3 consecutive Grade 1 wins. But in there is also Voodoo Song. Voodoo Song, no 4-Star Dave. Remember, 4-Star Dave won 8 consecutive years at Saratoga and vaulted himself into legendary status at the Spa. But Voodoo Song last year ran 4 times at Saratoga and won all 4 times. Maybe not the quality of Heart to Heart, hasn't won a Grade 1 yet, but also likes to run on the front end. Probably Heart to Heart's got a little more quality than Voodoo Song. So if they're out there carving out some strong fractions, that's probably going to set things up for closers, and there's some very good ones in there, Brian, led by Yoshida.
Yoshida was really strong on his last race in America. That came at Churchill Downs. He got some wet turf, and that is a possibility at Saratoga again Saturday. They are expecting some rain there tomorrow, so we could have some cut to ground in both of these turf courses that we're talking about this weekend. If it's wet, Yoshida probably only moves up. Of course, Matt, he went to Ascot after that big win on Derby Day in the Turf Classic, and ran a very respectable race in Royal Ascot. So Yoshida should get a lot of money. In fact, I think he'll buy for favoritism with Heart to Heart probably. Another one we need to talk about, Matt, is Delta Prince. Delta Prince has been a horse I've been watching all along, a half-brother to Royal Delta. He's a son of Street Cry for trainer Jimmy Jerkins. Always thought he had a ton of talent. If he could stay healthy, he's going good now.
Yeah, he certainly is. Came back with a big win up at Woodbine in the King Edward to start off his year. Had a lot of little problems, and Jimmy Jerkins thinks the horse may be finally getting over them, although he has said that Delta Prince prefers more firm going. As of yesterday, the turf course at Saratoga was yielding, so we'll see about that. There are other quality closers in there. There is Divisadero in there, who is a past Grade 1 winner, changed barns for 2018, got a recent win. But my feeling on Divisadero is that maybe he's a step slower than he was at his best. And I guess, Brian, there's only 6 in this field because there's only one Chad Brown horse in the race. And that is Made You Look, who's lightly raced, getting better. His races this year have been very good. Will probably be unusually large odds for a Chad Brown horse in here. My feeling about the 4-star Dave is that if Yoshida can bounce back from the trip across the pond to Royal Ascot, he could be very hard to beat in there, but that's a big question mark. So looking for a better price in here, I'm going to go with Delta Prince, thinking that he has finally found his best running.
Yeah, I wanted to bet Delta Prince in this spot as well, Matt. He will be my top pick as well, hoping, of course, that the turf course is at least good to firm rather than wetter than that, because then I think it might be a little bit tougher. But I just think he's a horse of major talent. He looked very good in Canada in his last one, and he should be ready to fire a big shot again, unless the turf course is too wet and Jerkins is right. Then you might want to think about going another way in here. I tell you what, I always do my own odds for these races beforehand, Matt, and I have Divisadero as the longest shot on the board. He's been pretty good this year, and he's one that often, just about every time throws in that big late kick. So if they run fast early, Divisadero's a threat, as is Made You Look, another horse who should be coming from off the pace. Again, kind of like Voodoo Song, but maybe even more so. He hasn't gotten much recognition yet, but he's run a lot of good races in New York. I liked his last one against Oscar Performance, so Made You Look. All 6, I guess, are what we're saying, Matt, are threats to win this. But it looks like we're on the same horse here in Delta Prince, which viewers that are watching right now, take that for what it is. Matt and I are both on the same horse. It's certainly not the favorite, it looks like. So that's either a death knell or a horse to really pay attention to in here. All right, Matt, let's thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. Thank you for your continued support. Also, folks, we appreciate you watching every week. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel right here on Horse Racing Nation. This is also the point of the show where Matt and I love to talk about our venture, Derby Day Racing. We have the really, really nice looking filly. I can say that now. I've seen her a bunch, Matt. The Looking at Lucky filly, Sooner Schooner, is looking really good at Churchill Downs.
Ryan, she's going to be working out tomorrow. I hope you'll go and shoot some video for me to see. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Not so fast, Matt. Before we thank Brett for the production, thank you, Brett. Let's talk a little bit more about Derby Day Racing. Yes, so I'll be there to see Sooner Schooner working her second workout for Derby Day Racing in the Buff Bradley barn. 2 times Breeders' Cup winner Buff Bradley tomorrow at Churchill Downs. Also, we have a few colts that we're getting more serious about as our second purchase for Derby Day Racing. This first partnership, there are still openings available. Please do contact me if you're interested. I guess that's it for the show, Matt. Another edition of HorseCenter in the books. Sorry again about the late entry this week, folks. It was out of our control, but we look forward to seeing you right here next week.